All right, good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Could ask the chambers to quiet itself, please. Thank you all very much. I want to call this meeting to order. This is the Santa Clara County Board of Supervisors. That's not where you want to be. You're in the wrong building on a rainy day. But let's ask the clerk to begin by calling the roll and establishing the presence of a quorum.
Supervisor Wasserman?
Here.
Supervisor Cortese?
Here.
Supervisor Ellenberg? Vice President Chavez? Here. And President Samidian?
Here.
You have a quorum.
Thank you very much. The presence of a quorum having been established, let me ask you all please rise. Join us in the Pledge of Allegiance, which will be led this morning by our Board Vice President Supervisor Cindy Chavez.
I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you all very much. That takes us to item number 3, which is the election of board officers for this 2019 calendar year. Board members will recall that at our first meeting in December, we had nominations, and the only nominees at that time were myself as president, Supervisor Chavez as vice president for the 2019 year. We'll ask the clerk to please display the voting panel on our screens and see if there is a motion to that effect. There is, by Supervisor Susan Ellenberg and a second by Supervisor Dave Cortese. We'll ask all 5 members of the board to please vote on the screen. All 5 members having cast their votes, we'll ask the clerk to please display the results overhead. Will indication that the motion carries 5-0. Thank you very much. That takes us to item number 4, which is to receive comments from the board president. And I think I will hold off on extensive comments until State of the County address, which is yet to be announced, but will be shortly, except to say that I know we have a challenging year, but also one filled with opportunities, and I'm sure the entire board's looking forward to it. And also want to take this opportunity to welcome our new colleague, Supervisor Susan Ellenberg, to her first regular meeting. Let me assure you the packets will not be as light as they are today in the months to come. But please, join me in welcoming our new colleague to the dais. That takes us to item number 5. Item number 5 is to announce adjournments in memoriam. This is when we take a moment to reflect on the passing of members of the Santa Clara County community. Supervisor Cortese, do you have an in memoriam this morning?
Yes, I do, President Smitty, and thank you. Actually, 2 of them. Let me start with asking the board to adjourn in honor of Pastor Kenny Foreman from the Cathedral of Faith. His memorial service at Cathedral of Faith was actually held on January 5th, and he passed away on December 16th, 2018 at the age of 88. I know that everybody on this dais knew him and knows of the great work of Cathedral of Faith over the years, but let me just make a few brief comments. And let me also ask before I do that whether or not there are any family members here. I understood that his sons, is this Elisa? Hi, would you please stand? This is his sons, who is Pastor Kenny Foreman, his son's wife, Elisa. Thank you for being here. And can we give her a round of applause just to welcome her? Welcome her. First, Pastor Foreman was a founding pastor of Cathedral of Faith in San Jose, church located right off of Kirtner Avenue in San Jose, if you're not familiar with it. And it began with a few dozen members in 1965, not at that location, but at another location in San Jose, ultimately growing to 12,000 members who attend 11 different campuses in the Bay Area. His full legal name was Roy Kenneth Foreman. He was born October 13th, 1930 in Crowley, Louisiana, to Hansel and Mabel Foreman. At the age of 17, Pastor Foreman left home to minister nationwide as an evangelist. He preached in large auditoriums, churches, and tent meetings. In 1953, he met Shirley, the daughter of Dr. and Mrs. Lowry of Trinity Church in Oakland. They married on September 14, 1957, spending their honeymoon cleaning an old theater in Kansas City, Missouri, where they would pioneer their first church, Calvary Temple. In 1965, Pastor Foreman moved to San Jose with Shirley and their two young sons to become pastor of what was then called Friendly Bible Church. As membership increased, the church outgrew its original campus, and the newly built 2,300-seat Cathedral of Faith was dedicated on March 15, 1981. And I will tell you, on January 5th, every one of those seats was full, and it was standing room only for the pastor's memorial. Pastor Foreman's son, Reverend Kenneth Foreman, carries on the family legacy, an individual I consider to be a good friend of mine and many of us in elected office, including many of my colleagues here on the Board of Supervisors. And Kurt Foreman, Pastor Foreman's other son, is the Director of Operations. Only 1 week after beginning the church in 1965, Pastor Foreman started on what was then ABC's KNTV, producing a weekly program, Kenny Foreman Presents Abundant Living. Pastor Foreman and the church televised those services through 2010, and today, keeping with that tradition, services are live streamed. Through his leadership, the Reaching Out Emergency Food Ministry was started in the early 1980s out of a church closet. If you haven't witnessed what that's all about, no matter what your religious denomination or not, it's worth going by and checking out the food ministry at Cathedral of Faith. It's just an unbelievable, large-scale operation which helps the homeless, the houseless, I should say, and any number of other people who are experiencing food anxiety or need for food. In 1993, construction was completed on a 16,000 square foot facility to house that growing ministry, and today, Reaching Out distributes over $15 million in food to over 160,000 economically disadvantaged persons in our community, and it's the largest food pantry that we know of in Northern California. Pastor Foreman survived by his wife Shirley, his sons Ken and Kurt, and 4 grandchildren and 2 great-grandchildren, along with an extraordinary number of folks who I think feel that they are extended family who have been part of the congregation over the years. Elisa, again, thank you for being here, and to my colleagues, thank you for allowing me a few minutes to speak about Pastor Kenny Foreman and I think our collective experience. I know Supervisor Chavez wants to say a few words.
Supervisor Chavez.
Thank you. I think that's right. All of us in public service have gotten an opportunity to work with Cathedral of Faith at one time or another, but a couple things I just wanted to share with all of you is that, you know, one of the efforts that county's had for a very long time has been this focus on reentry, helping people who are coming out of jail really be able to turn their lives around. And as part of our Faith Collaborative, one of the first churches that stepped up to play a leadership role was Cathedral of Faith. And then the other thing is, if any of you have ever been part of a neighborhood cleanup anywhere in the city of San Jose and you went to a barbecue afterwards to put up your feet and meet your neighbors, you went to Cathedral of Faith. And I think Pastor Kenny Foreman's just really generous heart really lives through his sons and all of you. And so I'm sorry for your loss. Thank you.
Thank you. I do have another in memoriam present submitting, and before I move on to that, I just want to add more than a footnote to my earlier comments that Pastor Foreman was one of those individuals, hopefully not too rare in our community, but one of those individuals who was the same no matter where he was or how many people were with him, whether you're alone with him in a small room speaking one-on-one where he could probably say whatever he wanted to say, or whether he was in front of 2,500 people or on television. He was exactly the same person, one of the most gracious people I ever met, with an extraordinary memory, right up to his last days. So thank you again. I would like to also acknowledge and honor the passing of a great man, David Walker Mitchell. Many of us in the local community knew him as just Dave Mitchell. He passed away on December 19th, 2018. He was 83 years old, and I want to acknowledge any of his family who are here today. Is anyone here from Dave Mitchell family? I wasn't sure coming into the meeting today. David married Carolyn Lynn in 1961 and had 2 daughters, Sarah and Betsy, and 3 grandchildren. He was born in Berkeley, raised in San Gabriel, California, graduated from Stanford class of 1957 and went on to Harvard, which is where he met Lynn. Besides being a very successful attorney, and including stints at 2 very prominent law firms here in Santa Clara County, David was well known for his service to the community, having worked with organizations such as the First Congregational Church of Palo Alto Community Fund, Silicon Valley Community Foundation, the Hertz Foundation, Stanford University's Office of Development, and Stanford Historical Society, Second Harvest Food Bank, San Jose Chamber of Commerce, United Way, and American Leadership Forum. He was an extraordinary environmentalist and in fact served as a board member of the Peninsula Open Space Trust for 23 years. And it should be acknowledged that he was an Eagle Scout, of course the highest honor a scout can achieve. He was an avid hiker and instilled his love of nature in his daughters and grandchildren. I had the opportunity to deal with him on a personal level, on a political level from time to time, but also as a client from time to time. He was an extraordinary counselor and one of those people whose loss brought a great deal of sadness to many civically engaged people here in our community. So thank you, President Simidian. Those are my requests, and I'm grateful to the board for the anticipated honoring of these adjournments today.
Thank you, Supervisor Cortese and Supervisor Chavez, and please convey the sympathy of our entire board to friends and family. Thank you. Thank you again. All right, that's going to take us in a moment to item number 6. Before we get there, let me just say that we have public comment cards for item number 8, which is public comment. And in order to manage the time appropriately, we ask that you get your cards in before we begin item number 8. This is so we can properly structure the time and the format. So if you would like to speak on item number 8, please get your yellow card into the clerk now. Item number 6, actually, Supervisor Cortese, I understand we have a request to hold that item.
It passed us until we get to that point in the agenda. Thank you.
And then item number 7 is commendations and proclamations. And I believe, Supervisor Chavez, we're going to turn to you to provide some words of commendation. Yes? Yes, good. Thank you. Good.
Well, good morning, everyone. I feel like a teacher today. Good morning, everyone, all in our places with bright, shiny faces. And I want to bring up one of those bright, shiny faces, and that's Christina Cunningham. We're going to be honoring her for her service to the County of Santa Clara. And if I could invite her sister Sharon to come on up with her and her brother-in-law Bob, if you would come up and join her, I would appreciate it. Thank you. And Jim, I'm going to ask you to come up for the picture. I won't make you stand up here, but I'm really honored on behalf of the Board of Supervisors to present a commendation to Christina Cunningham for 18 years of unbelievable service to the people of Santa Clara County. She began her service to the county as an aide and then chief of staff to one of my predecessors, former Supervisor Blanca Alvarado. And for 8 years in the office of Supervisor Alvarado, Christina joined the department joined the Department of Aging and Adult Services within SSA, our social services agency. And she held several management positions before being appointed as the Chief Deputy Public Administrator, Guardian, and Conservator in 2014. And I cannot emphasize what a challenging job that is. And really, your team is just so grateful for the amount of time you spent connecting people together, building trust, and really working to rebuild that office. I do want to just say one more thing before I say thank you for your incredible legacy, and that is that I actually met you as a community activist and a leader. So long before her 18 years, she was giving back to this community with just every kind of service in her neighborhood that you can imagine, and it really is an honor to say thank you for your service and congratulations. I'm going to present you this commendation.
Congratulations indeed.
Thank you, Cindy. The only thing I want to say is thank you. Thank you to Cindy for doing this and the other board members, and also to my team, which it was an honor to work for the county, an honor. And the county takes such good care of you. I also had an experience where during a number of years I had stage 3 cancer. The county is a wonderful place to work for, and I am so grateful for that. And the people that I have met and the people that we served, we truly do, I can say this now, I'm not part of the department, we do God's work. But we do, you know, we take care of people that, it's a safety net issue, and without so many wonderful employees at the county and wonderful leaders such as yourself, this work would not be done. So thank you to all of you.
Congratulations. Can we take a picture real quick?
Congratulations and thanks once again. Colleagues, that takes us to item number 8, which is public comment. Public comment is that portion of our agenda set aside for comment by members of the public on non-agendized items, items that are not on our agenda, but that are properly within the jurisdiction of our board. If you would like to speak under public comment, there are yellow cards at the back of the chambers. Just fill one out and get it to the clerk. And we do have a number of cards this morning, and consistent with the number of cards we have in the rules of the board, we're going to ask each of our speakers this morning to limit themselves to just 1 minute, if you could, please. 1 minute. And what I'm going to do is call you all up and ask you to come line up so we can move along expeditiously. So we're going to start with Richard Shavira, followed by Evan Dowling, Brent Nikolai, Salwa Hatum, Susan Byrne, Monica Ramos, Debbie Chang, and there will be others. But again, Richard Shavira, Evan Dowling, Brent Nikolai, Salwa Hatum, Susan Byrne, Monica Ramos, and Debbie Chang. Come right up. And for those of you who are not used to speaking in our chambers, there is a microphone embedded in the podium. So when the time comes, just speak loud and clear and we'll hear you. Thank you and welcome. Good morning.
Yes, my name is Richard Chivera. I work for the Santa Clara County Probation Department. I'm here because of bullying. Bullying is very strong in our department and other departments. We're bullied because of our age, sex, race, religion. It's a strong bullying that we are facing. A lot of staff are so afraid, they are afraid to come and speak out. But I'm here to let you know that it is strong and it is consistent. I hope you guys will listen to me and maybe we can talk about it and I can get a group of people to come up and talk to you, but they truly fear retaliation. Bullying is strong in our departments. Please help.
Next speaker is Evan Dowling.
Evan Dowling, Management Analyst. I'm sorry to report that I just returned again from the DA's office. I would have gone to the County Council Whistleblowers Program, but I have documented proof, according to sworn testimony, that County Council failed to investigate my prior complaints in 2014 for 13 months until after the statute of limitations had expired and only after I went to the DA's office. Perjury in California is a felony. James Ramone, the director of the Department of Aging and Adult Services, stated under sworn testimony that his focus was on Don Moody from 2013 well into the summer of 2014 regarding who to blame as to why the public administrator, guardian, conservator policies and procedures were not properly revised. That I should have known well enough to contact the Adult Protective Services manager with additional information as a mandated reporter. That once a referral is made, that is the extent of any contact that I, as a mandated reporter, should have had with the APS program, and that he asked me to please complete a leave request prior to my meeting with a law enforcement official regarding incidents involving his department.
I'm sorry, I need to ask you to wrap up your comments, sir.
I'm trying to wrap them up.
No,
all
sir,
of these statements
your
are
1 minute
false,
is complete.
and I'd like to deliver these documents. If you could please post these on the board agenda. Thank you.
Let me ask for the next speaker to come forward. And again, let me ask that each speaker respect the 1 minute limit so we can get to all the speakers this morning in a timely fashion. Good morning. Welcome.
Good morning. My name is Salwa Hatum. I'm a nurse at O'Connor Hospital and St. Louis bargaining team member. In December, we met with the county executive, Jeff Smith, to discuss the sale of O'Connor Hospital in St. Louis and the transition of working under the county. We were told that the county wants to respect nurses' demand to keep their current job, salary, and union. In fact, the county proposed a solution where nurses at both hospitals may keep their current pay protected and continue representation of California Nurses Association. And nurses at VMC could receive wage increases to address the massive wage disparity. This seemed to be a solution that would benefit everyone. However, we're surprised that VMC nurses know nothing about this proposal. We expected the county to be more transparent and that nurses can see themselves in the solution has been proposed. Nurses at O'Connor and St. Louis made it very clear that we will fight for our new union no matter what. They already submitted a petition with a supermajority, and we do not want RNPA representation. Therefore, we ask the county to respect our rights. Committed in writing, please.
Thank you very much. And again, for those of you who do have comments in writing, you feel free to share them with the clerk of the board. They will be copied and distributed to all 5 members of our board. Thank you. Next speaker, come on up. Let me ask the clerk to step over and grab the copy of the remarks.
Hi, my name is Susan. I'm a registered nurse at O'Connor Hospital. Over the years, I have seen many changes at my hospital and know how crucial it has been for nurses to have a strong voice, to advocate for our patients and our community. This strong voice comes from our right to collectively bargain under the union of our choosing, and that is the California Nurses Association. And it has helped us recruit and retain experienced and passionate nurses. That is why last month we delivered to you a petition with signatures from a supermajority of nurses from both St. Louis and O'Connor hospitals, demanding the county recognize California Nurses Association as our chosen union, representing us in collective bargaining. We expect that the county will honor that choice. We are eager to move forward with the county's proposal of wage increases for VMC nurses if RMPA works with CNA to respect all nurses' right to democratically choose their union. Recognizing our union and paying all county nurses a fair wage are essential to retaining experienced nurses and protecting our patients and community.
Thank you for your comments this morning. Next speaker, come on up.
Thank you. Good morning. My name is Brent Nikolai. I've been a registered nurse at VMC, registered nurse and a trauma nurse at VMC for going on 20 years now. We strongly, with RMPA, support the county's acquisition of both facilities of O'Connor and St. Louis, as if those facilities no longer operate, we're going to be in deep trouble. Valley's the busiest emergency department in the Bay Area. We're a trauma center, we're a burn center, and if O'Connor and St. Louis don't operate, we're taking that on, when we'd be in a lot of trouble. We need the acquisition of these 2 hospitals to be completed in a transparent and open manner. And we need pay equity between all 3 hospitals. Thank you for your time. I appreciate it.
Thank you. And who's our next speaker? Please come forward.
Monica Ramos.
Welcome.
Hello, good morning. My name is Monica, and I'm a registered nurse at St. Louis Hospital. Advocating for my patients is a big part of my role as a nurse, and I'm here today to continue that advocacy for my patients, my fellow nurses, and my community. Patients are best cared for when nurses' voices are heard, and that's why nurses have made it very clear that through this transition process, all nurses must stay in their current job with their current wages and retain their seniority so we can continue to serve the community. It's equally vital that the county agree to only negotiate with St. Louis and O'Connor nurses about our work through our chosen union, California Nurses Association. And finally, you must ensure that all current patient services remain open. We have reached out to you and would like to meet with each of you in the coming weeks to ensure this transition results in the best outcome for nurses, patients, and the community. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next speaker, please. And folks, we ask that you hold off on applause. Want to make it comfortable for everybody to come forward and speak their mind, regardless of their point of view. So, welcome.
Welcome. Good morning, everyone, honorable supervisors and Dr. Smith. My name's Debbie Chang. I'm the RMPA president of Registered Nurses Professional Association. A lot of our members today are not here because we asked them to stay home because it is raining outside. So we want everybody to stay safe. First of all, we want to let you know that we do support the acquisition, and we want to let you know that we take pride in taking care of our patients at Valley Med and throughout the Santa Clara County Health and Hospital System. It's unfortunate the Attorney General has placed this sale on hold because it's going to negatively impact our trauma center, and lives will be jeopardized if 2 hospitals were to close. This is something we definitely do not want to occur. It's not in the best interest of anyone. If we are successful in the sale of the hospitals, we ask that the current nurses receive their current wages and that we have equity all around for RNPA as well. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. We have cards from Alan Kamara, Linda Hurley, Melissa Truesdale, Fernando, I believe it's Rockchild, Susan Bassey, Michael Blomquist, Scott Largent, Mary Jones, and we have one more, and this will be our last card, folks. And again, Mr. Trout in the back, I did announce earlier that we wanted all cards in before we began. I've got your card, though. We're going to go ahead and accommodate you today, but in future, I'm going to ask that the clerk have our published agenda indicate all cards have to be in prior to public comment so that we can just manage the time, be a little more efficient. But we're happy to accommodate you today. And we welcome our next speaker. Please tell us who you are, if you will.
Good morning, Supervisors. My name is Alan Kamara.
Thank you.
Welcome, Supervisor Ellenberg. I'm here speaking on behalf of our nurses and all the nurses in Santa Clara County, the clinical nurses. I'm hearing all this that there was an offer made to RNPA to allow another union to come in. We just want to remind the county of Article 1 of our contract, our CBA rights, which give RNPA the exclusive bargaining rights for all the clinical nurses in Santa Clara County. So we ask that the county respect that. We empathize with our brothers and sisters. We welcome them on board. We look forward welcoming them, and thank you guys for the acquisition.
All right, thank you. Next speaker. Good morning and welcome.
Good morning. I'm Linda Hurley. I'm on the board of directors of RMPA and worked as a nurse at BMC for 12 years. As RMPA enters contract negotiations with the county this year, we have been upfront about our need for increased wages for all Santa Clara nurses we will be representing. Santa Clara nurses are paid well below regional market value, and our priority is raising these wages to be able to retain the dedicated nurses we have working in the Santa Clara County. The recent county medical expansion will not serve the community if we cannot staff them safely with registered nurses. As negotiations and conversations are had, we ask the board be as committed as RMPA is to being transparent and blocking the spread of misinformation and speculations. At the end of the day, this expansion and opportunity to increase wages and benefits to keep all hospitals and clinics fully staffed ultimately benefit our local communities best. I've included more, but I'll hand that.
Thank you so much. And next speaker, welcome.
Hi, good morning. Thank you, Board of Supervisors. My name's Melissa Truesdale. I've been a nurse on the progressive care unit at VMC for 20 years. I personally witnessed the disintegration of our core staff. Experienced nurses do not apply, and those who do are offered wages that are not competitive and substandard of living wage in our local economy.
Ms. Truesdale, if you could stop for just a moment, we'll stop your clock. Could we make sure that the door in the back is closed so that we've got quiet and we can hear the speaker? And I'm going to ask the clerk to just reset your time in a minute, ma'am, okay? All right.
Do I have to start over now?
No,
Okay.
all up to you.
So I just got more time.
You just got more time.
All right. The fallout from this, what you have come to know as our revolving door. Dwindling numbers of experienced nurses repeatedly training, guiding, and supervising newly trained and experienced nurses. These nurses obtain valuable training at the expense of the county and repeatedly fluctuate in and out of our facility, taking that valuable training at the expense and to benefit their next employer. Many of these employers encourage nurses to go to Valley to get the training and experience and then come back and work there. Our experienced nurses often leave as a result of this increased stress and burnout, seeking higher wages and more stable work environments. There has to be a balance as it jeopardizes patient safety, and at the end of the day, you get what you pay for. And as being the safety net for the community, we can't afford to continue this mindset. We owe it to our community the best and safest care possible. They count on the county to deliver the promise of better health for all and the commitment to better wages for all.
Thank you for your comments. Next speaker, please.
Good morning, Honorable Board of Supervisors, and congratulations, Susan Ellenberg, on your well-deserved victory. My name is Fernando Rockchild, registered nurse at Valley Medical ER for the past 20 years. As you know, RMPA is the Registered Nurses Professional Association, is the sole recognized union in Santa Clara County for registered nurses. And we are excited to be expanding with the purchase of St. Louis, O'Connor, and DePaul Health Center. RMPA is committed to working with the Board of Supervisors and new members to make this transition as smooth as possible and transparent. We are dedicated to advocating for our current members and welcoming in our newest brothers and sisters. Transition and change can be a time of uncertainty, and we want to ensure every step is transparent and communicated to all Santa Clara nurses. And now, due to the timing and circumstances of these acquisitions, and more recently the state AG's desire to appeal the sale of these health facilities, transparency and communication become even more important. It is our sincere desire, and it behooves the county to be more transparent and deliberate and have good faith discussions with RMPA to ensure a smooth transition that everybody wants.
Thank you for your comments. Next speaker.
Good morning, Mike Blomquist. I had some handouts for you earlier. I'm here today to request to get it on an agenda pursuant to Streets and Highway Code 8320. A road, our sole legal recorded access, was vacated without due process. The county was supposed to have had hearings for San Jose Water's 2 million gallon water tank that was actually built on the recorded road, and numerous parcel lines. It's my understanding an unlawful division of real property as well as unlawful vacation of the existing road. That road was approved, I believe, back in '59 by the Board of Supervisors. The record of survey was recorded, and as you can see, the tank is now on top of it. There's numerous other issues and violations surrounding that. The property is in an SRA. The county and San Jose Water receive millions of dollars per year from the state for fire protection services, and San Jose Water is also gets public access to El Sereno that they're getting $30 million for.
Thank you, and we're going to ask the County Council to take a look at the request, sir. All right, thank you. And before our next speaker, I should indicate, I think many of you know, we are precluded by state law from taking action on any specific item that's referenced today during public comment, simply because it hasn't been agendized. But thank you for coming to the board and sharing your thoughts and your concerns so that we are aware of them. But I just wanted folks to understand why they didn't see the board engaging or taking formal action on items this morning. Thank you for your patience. Good morning and welcome.
Thank you. My name is Mary Jones. I currently have been employed at Santa Clara County Main Jail as a medical unit clerk. We have had a problem with the Chronos clock that is now being put down on the main floor. During my 6 months of being there, I've been a county employee for the 17 years. I am now being demoted from Santa Clara County Main Jail due to the fact of my swipe-in. In March of 2018, 210 nurses have signed a petition stating that we have been docked pay, we have been asked for leave without pay, and we have been given a thing of you have to use your sick time. At this point, I've been probationary released due to the fact of the swipes. On January 11th, I was demoted. On January 9th, the Chronos clock was placed in the lower part of the main jail. I feel that this is unfair, not just to me, but all staff that are there. We are being used all of our time, and that is taking money out of our pocket. At this present time, I am now a half code and not a full-time code.
Thank you. Ms. Bassey, good morning.
Good morning, and happy 2019. I just want to let you know that I'm renewing my commitment to watchdogging our courts and our lawyers, private and governmental lawyers in our county. First of all, I want to say that when you're in the hospital, and Mike, your back's hurting you, you're going to need these people, these nurses, the ones that you're not taking care of, the ones that you're not listening to. You're not going to need a lawyer. I think people in our county would be shocked to know that right now, this county is prosecuting me for taking a photograph in a public courthouse of police misconduct. District Attorney Jeff Rosen has assigned Allison Philo and another prosecutor to my case. That's 2 prosecutors for a total of $500,000 a year in annual salary. That is shocking. These nurses need to be taken care of because when you need them, James Williams isn't going to be able to help you out. This county has not audited the county council audit office in over 30 years. And they have interfered with elections related to our sheriff. That hit the news. It also hit the news that our district attorney is allowing sexual abuse, and we're going to have to address it. So it's time to start doing that, guys.
Thank you, ma'am. Folks, please. Mr. Largent, you're up next, and then Mr. Trout, I believe, is the last speaker under public comment.
Hi, good morning, everyone. I've been reminiscing about the 80s. It's been kind of interesting. And, you know, you go online and you can look up, you know, all the neat toys that were in 1988. So you wonder why I've been kind of on the 1988 gig. The Nintendo came out, that NES one, you know, the small one where you had to blow on the cartridges to make it work. And what it says on here is that the market for NES cartridges that year was also bigger than the entire computer software market. So it's pretty shocking. You know, it was a big difference from now to 1988. And remember what Susan was just saying, that's the last year that the county council had an audit. 1988. And when I attend all these meetings and you see the priorities of these audits, somebody must be fudging the numbers because I didn't see anything on there that said 1988. You guys can make that happen. We need to make that happen with the county council's office. Like I keep talking about with the IDO scam, we have the proof, we have the appeals, we have the information to show what Sylvia Perez is doing and what James the Devil Williams is doing with people's cases. Thank you, Joe.
Mr. Largent. Next speaker.
Hear me. If you want the news, you go to InfoWars. Our nation is being destroyed right in front of our eyes. We're being almost totally lied to by CNN and the rest of them. It's amazing. But truth is truth. Truth is truth. We have no border. We're being attacked by illegal invaders. 80% of those women are being raped. 80%. Jesus is coming back. Now, Jesus said, my doctrine is not mine, but his that sent me. If any man will do his will, he shall know of the doctrine, whether it be of God or whether I speak of myself. He that speaks of himself seeks his own glory, but he that seeks the glory of him that sent him, the same is true, and no unrighteousness is in him. He is the truth. He's coming back. It's going to be Passover, in my opinion. 8,430 days from the start of the Jubilee will be Passover, the day Jesus died on. He's going to come back, in my opinion.
Thank you for your comments. And let me just confirm with the clerk, that was the last of our speakers under public comment. Colleagues, that completes item number 8 and takes us to item number 9, which is to approve the consent calendar and any changes to the Board of Supervisors agenda. We have the goldenrod copy, which I believe, I'm going to confirm with the clerk, is the most recent revision or proposed set of revisions, I should say, to our consent calendar. Why don't we ask the clerk to walk us through those proposed revisions and thank once again those who chose to be with us this morning to speak to the board. Thank you again for coming. Madam Clerk, go right ahead.
We have a request from Supervisor Cortese to hold item number 6 to January 29, 2019. Item number 6 is to recognize the Santa Clara County Agriculture Plan for receiving the Governor's Environmental and Economic Leadership Award for Ecosystem and Land Use Stewardship. We have a request from administration to continue item number 10 to date uncertain. Item 10 is a public hearing to purchase real property known as Lakeview Stables located at 23100 McKean Road in the unincorporated area of Santa Clara County. We have a request from administration to hold item number 13 to January 29, 2019. Item 13 is to consider recommendations from the Department of Planning and Development relating to the final recommendations of the Agricultural Preservation Task Force. We have a request from Vice President Chavez and Supervisor Wasserman to add item numbers 17 and 18 to the consent calendar. 17 is to approve request for appropriation modification number 173, $404,393, transferring funds from the General Fund Contingency Reserve to the Department of Parks and Recreation budget relating to adding one unclassified management analyst or associate management analyst position, and reimbursing the Park Charter Fund for staff time relating to the All-Inclusive Playground Grant Program. Item 18 is the adoption of salary ordinance number NS-5.19.68, amending Santa Clara County Salary Ordinance number NS-5.19 relating to compensation of employees, adding one unclassified management analyst or associate management analyst position in Department of Parks and Recreation. We have a request from the assessor to delete item number 33. Item 33 is to announce travel for elected officials as follows. Lawrence E. Stone, assessor, will travel to Sacramento to attend the annual California Assessors Association kickoff meeting on January 24th through 25th, 2019. We have a request from President Semidian to remove item number 36 from the consent calendar. Item 36 is to approve request for appropriation modification number 174 for $40,000, transferring funds from the Office of the Sheriff Budget to the Special Programs Budget relating to winter patrol services. We have a request from President Semidian to hold item number 45B to date uncertain. Item 45B is to announce appointments and reappointments by individual board members to various boards and commissions. We have a request from Supervisor Ellenberg to hold item number 45C to date uncertain. Item 45C is to announce appointments and reappointments by individual board members to various boards and commissions. And that concludes my list.
Thank you very much. And just to clarify our process here with the consent calendar revisions, we will first hear from the clerk, as we have just done. I will then ask board colleagues if they have any additions, deletions, or changes. Board members are, of course, free to ask that other items be placed on our consent calendar. That being said, it's the custom and practice of our board to leave items on the agenda if any member of our board wishes to be sure that the item is heard. And after we go through the board once, we'll then go to speakers. We do have one card on public comment today, and then we'll check in with the board one last time before we adopt the revised consent calendar. I'm going to start at that end of the dais. Supervisor Ellenberg, I see your light is on.
Thank you, President Semidian. I want to confirm first, I have a general comment, not asking to pull or add an item. Should I make that now or wait?
I'd say go right ahead, and worst case, you get, gaveled down. I think that's unlikely, but go right ahead.
Thank you. Clearly, it's all new to me. But I wanted to share that one of the things that I noticed in reviewing today's agenda was the number of requests for allocation of funds from the General Fund Contingency Reserve. There are 4 today for a total request of roughly $250,000. And to be clear, I have no particular issue with any of the specific items, and I do intend to approve the consent calendar as it stands, but I'm curious to learn more about how we determine when it's appropriate to dip into the reserve. I understand that there is a statutory minimum reserve that our county must hold. It's 5% of the overall budget. And based on the language in the requests in this agenda, it seems to me that granting those requests would dip us below the required minimum, triggering a need to backfill or replenish. And I know that my colleagues here have had the good fortune of serving the last several years during a very strong economy and have been told that the reserves have been able to be replenished as required. But I would like to hear from administration now or when it's appropriate whether it's feasible again this year for us to replenish the reserve by the end of the fiscal year. And a request moving forward, I would like some guidance from administration or county council or certainly from my colleagues on whether there's a process that we can investigate that would allow us to better forecast some of these items within the budgeting process so that we are not frequently reallocating funds on an ad hoc basis or maybe some guidelines around the type of request that might warrant drawing down from the contingency reserves.
Thank you, Supervisor. I see the county executive leaning in, and I'll turn to him in just a moment for whatever brief comments he may wish to make today. We do have the option, of course, of having an off-agenda report on the subject, just to sort of clarify where we are these days on this subject. I think that might be helpful, but I'll let you determine what you think would be most useful.
I think an off-agenda report would be
And then, of course, I know the county executive is going to say that he and his staff would be free to meet with you or any board member to discuss this. And then, of course, we've got the mid-year budget review process coming soon, which might be another opportunity for a discussion about this issue. Now, if I haven't stolen all of the county executive's thunder, I'm going to turn to him and see what he'd like to say, since he's the county executive.
No, you haven't gotten all my thunder.
There you go.
I was going to, during my comment section, talk a little bit more about the budget and problems that we're having this year. So I'll save a little bit of that for later. However, this particular issue of the use of the contingency reserve was also part of those intended comments. The policy for the board is to continue with a 5% contingency reserve, and there's policies requiring a 4/5 majority vote for any allocation from the contingency reserve. The process that's related to policing those policies really falls upon the board to decide with a 4/5 majority vote. We are concerned considerably about our contingency reserve fund. Is highly likely the mid-year will not be able to replenish the contingency reserve completely unless we are able to generate, or I should say allocate, some additional revenue. This year the fund balances for the departments are looking smaller than anticipated, and some of that has to do with approvals related to funding at the hospital. Some of it has to do with fewer vacant funded positions. There's a lot of components of it. So it is a concern from an administration perspective, and obviously with regard to this issue, we take direction from the board. Later on, I'll talk some more about the budget.
Is that responsive to your questions for this morning, Ms. Ellenberg?
It's a start. I really appreciate that. Thank you, Dr. Smith and President Smidian.
Thank you. Supervisor Cortese, I see your light is on, sir.
Thank you. Yeah, I'll be supporting the recommendations just reviewed by the clerk, but I'd also like to ask that we hold item 21A, which would be the approval of the minutes of the December 13, 2018 special joint meeting with the Santa Clara Valley Water District Board of Directors. I, along with my staff, are still looking at that in terms of just some basic omissions and so forth. So if we can hold that over a couple weeks, we can work with the administration and the clerk. And I think the omissions are coming from the water district side because of some breakdowns in recording referrals and things that came up during that meeting. So I just want to make that clear, but I'm sure our clerk's office can assist us in trying to extract that information out of them in the next 2 weeks. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, sir. Supervisor Wasserman, anything on? Nope. Supervisor Chavez? Nothing? All right. Then we have, just for the public and before we call on speakers, we have the revised consent calendar update as contained in the goldenrod document at the back of our chambers. The only change to that document is we have a request from Supervisor Cortese to hold item 21A, I believe it is. Yes, Supervisor?
Yes.
Thank you. And then, of course, we have Supervisor Ellenberg's request for information on the larger set of issues around reserves. Thank you. We do have one card on the consent calendar, and that's from Mr. Scott Largent. Mr. Largent, if you're still in the room. We'll come back. And then, colleagues, we have a card from Deb Goldine, who is here. And Ms. Goldine, if you'll listen carefully, please. You're here, as I understand it, on item number 10. And item number 10 is the Lakeview Stables issue, which we have a request from administration to continue to a date uncertain, meaning not hear it today, hear it at some other time, which is yet to be determined. That being said, if you've made your way to the chambers in this weather, I think the least we can do is give you 2 minutes to speak to the item if you would like, so that if and when it comes back, we will have heard from you today. On the other hand, if you don't wish to speak, since the item's not going to be acted upon today, that is, of course, your choice.
I'll speak today and I'll come back.
All right. Please come on up then, and the only other speaker we have is from Mr. Scott Largent, but if you come to the podium, not the microphone, right over here to your right. Thank you. Keep going.
This is a microphone?
There,
My God,
oh my
isn't
goodness,
it?
there you go. All right. Take 2 minutes and tell us what you'd like us to know.
So I have to state my name for the record, Deb Goldine. I work with kids and horses. I have rescued horses, and I teach. I use them. I give them a second life. And I know a great deal about the horse world. It's impossible for me to convey how important this activity is in 1 minute. It can take me years to get it across to people who are unfamiliar with horses. The short story is, if Lakeview can become a county-run stable, that would be amazing. And it would be just really, really, really wonderful. As the horse world has contracted, and then I'm 55 years old, I've lived here all my life, and I remember when there were horses on the corner of Page Mill and El Camino in Palo Alto. And, you know, so it's all gone, and what's been left is this tiny sliver, and 99% of that tiny sliver is high-end snobs, and it's just, it's a world I don't want to have anything to do with. It's an important part of the horse world, but it shouldn't be that huge percentage of it. The only really venues that I feel are serving the public and serving horses and serving well-being are the publicly owned ones at this point, and West Wind Barn is the one that comes to mind. And again, I can't go into detail on that in this, and that's part of why I want to push for the county to take it over. In the Mercury News article, one of the council members, one of the supervisors visited and said this place is a dump. Oh, honey, whoever you were, come and I'll show you a dump. Lakeview is not a dump. There are dumps out there, and I can go, if you want to get my name on the record, I'm happy to tour anybody through anything and bend your ear for hours. But no, Lakeview is not a dump, so please consider it, and I'll be back. Thank you.
Thank you very much. The only other card we have, as I indicated, is from Scott Largent. Is Mr. Largent in the chambers? He is not. All right. Then what we'll do is we'll say thank you to the one speaker we had, and we will ask the clerk now, before we go to the clerk, any additional changes or deletions? Mr. Largent, you've made your way. Thank you, sir. Come on up.
My apologies. I was outside talking with Paul Murphy. I always like catching up with him, figuring out some new things of what they're doing at the whistleblower program. Always on the consent calendar, of course, there's board appointments and to committees and commissions for our county. I started bringing in, of course, filming equipment years ago to start filming all of our domestic violence council meetings. They're not, of course, televised in here. I thought it was better for the people that I interact with court to show them kind of how the system works. And it was just eye-opening to be able to see into our court systems, to be able to see the executive committee of the Domestic Violence Council. And it was also eye-opening to understand that no one ever shows up. And that 80% of the Domestic Violence Council meetings and subcommittees, they never make quorum. The last one I went to in the Isaac Newton Auditorium, it's like a laughing joke. And these are all the people that you're assigning to these committees. I understand attendance is not mandatory, but this is more than just an F. This is like an incomplete. This is an absolute failure. So the people that you have all appointed, I mean, of course, not you yet, Susan, but they're not doing their job. So we need to figure out a way, how do we, when I ran an electronics business, it's called, you need to fire these people. You need to remove them. They're not doing their job. I have started to put these meetings up on YouTube. And I want the public to understand how much of a failure it is, because I want this to work properly, and it is not. Now, maybe if you all could take some time and bop into some of these meetings, maybe that will light the fire under these people to realize that the big supervisors, the big bosses in charge, have their eyes in to know what's going on. These committees are a failure, and you're more than welcome to review all the videos I have and watch the train wreck. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And we have one more card from Ms. Susan Bassey. Ms. Bassey, on the consent calendar, ma'am.
I'm going to follow up on that, about your appointments. First of all, I'm highly concerned about the separation of powers and the fact that you've appointed judges. Judge Michael Clark to your Domestic Violence Council. You appointed Patricia Lucas to your Public Safety and Justice Committee. And those people had input. They sat side by side with others who had input and votes and influenced you. Cindy, I think your appointment of Patricia Lucas to the Public Safety and Justice is the most disappointing. You sat with Patricia Lucas on a committee when the new courthouse was being built. You promised the taxpayers that that would be built as a therapeutic environment for court proceedings, for divorce cases and custody cases. And in actuality, since you sat on that committee, divorce cases have gone from taking a year to a year and a half to 5 to 10 years. It's shocking. And the only people who are making money in that are the private lawyers. And they're connected to Jeff Rosen, and Jeff Rosen is giving them a free pass. Ms. Ellenberg, you were part of the Women's Policy Group. I attended one of those meetings. It was one of the most despicable things I'd ever seen in county government in my life. Mr. Largent took me in. They didn't make quorum. There was nobody there. And that policy group did nothing for women since it was started in the 1970s. Women in this county have failed. They have been left behind. They have not been paid the proper wages in their workplaces, and they have not received equitable divisions in their divorce cases. They are losing custody of their children for no reason other than corrupt and incompetent judges that we have appointed and then elected, and Jeff Rosen has given a free pass on public corruption. William Dancer was removed from traffic court, and he was prosecuted for a 182 and a 96.5 penal code. He was removed from the bench because he was fixing traffic court cases. Judge Towery is fixing our family court cases.
All right, let me confirm with the clerk that is the last of our cards. Thank you very much. And that means we are ready to approve the consent calendar as revised, unless there are any last-minute revision requests. And there appear to be none, so we'll ask all 5 members to please vote on the screen. All 5 votes having been cast, we'll ask the clerk to please display the results on the screens overhead, and passes 5-0. Thank you very much. That would take us to item number 10, but that item has been held to a date uncertain, as indicated earlier, which means we are now ready to go to item number 11, which is to receive a report from the county executive. Dr. Smith.
Thank you, Mr. President, members of the board. I had 4 issues to talk to you about briefly today. A couple of announcements. One very pleasant announcement. Our clerk of the board, Megan Doyle, delivered her baby yesterday. Healthy female. Both mom and babe are doing fine. We don't have a name yet, but we're all excited about that. Yay, Megan. She's not going to be around for a while because of maternity leave. Then a bit of bad news. Deputy County Executive Leslie Krull's husband passed away last night. He's had a long illness, but still the passage was unexpected. We send our condolences and hearts out to Leslie and the family, and I would ask the board to consider in a future meeting an adjournment in his memoriam. Third, as I mentioned, I wanted to talk a little bit about the budget. We've been working on both the mid-year and preparation for the fiscal year budget. The revenue projections are not as vigorous as we would like, and our current utilization of fund balance for this fiscal year has been larger than we would like. So when we come to mid-year, as I mentioned, we might well have problems replenishing the contingency reserve. For the fiscal year budget, things look a little bit better. We recently received approval from Center for Medi-Cal and Medicare Services for the state's application for EPP and QIP funding, which are the two successor supplemental Medi-Cal payments related to disproportionate share funding at the hospital. That should be a significant amount of money for us. What happens at this point is the total amount is decided by the state and the feds for the entire state, and then it's allocated among the disproportionate share hospitals by a complex formula, so I can't give you the exact numbers at this point. But that additional supplemental payment will help us out in the fiscal year. We are very nervous about the potential downturn, inevitable downturn in the economy, which appears from all indicators to be coming soon. We also are concerned about anticipated new expenditures, particularly related to our PERS contributions and our costs for employees, particularly since we have negotiations for new contracts opening up. And so we will encourage the board and the department heads to think prudently, more prudently, extremely prudently about new expenditures. With regard to the next issue, the hospital acquisition, wanted to give you a brief update. As you're aware, and the public I think is probably aware, the California Attorney General has decided to appeal our sale order from the bankruptcy court and to request a stay. I won't go into the legal technicalities, but any delay beyond March 1st of the closing will kill the deal, because our APA, which is our bid, is only effective until that time. Also, we're very concerned about the continued degeneration of the function of the hospitals with staff leaving. I'm not saying they're providing low quality care. As a matter of fact, they're providing high quality care, but the census numbers are lower and lower. So that's a very big concern. We certainly don't want to anticipate purchasing hospitals that are non-functional. Myself, Greta Hansen, and Doug Press are going up to Sacramento to talk with representatives from the AG's office. We're leaving at 1 o'clock, so hopefully we're done by then today, in order to try to make our case. The filings for a hearing that was scheduled by the district court are due on Friday, and we will try to get them to remove their request for stay and hearing at this point. The hearing related to those motions is January 30th. So we're running into a time crunch, and we're anxious to try to get resolution of it. So with that, maybe I'll turn it over to James during his commentary to elucidate you on the legal issues.
Before you do, I noticed that Supervisor Chavez would like to either weigh in or ask a question. Supervisor?
Thank you very much. Thank you for all that. I know there's a lot going on, and I just want to say how much I appreciate the leadership of both your team and county council's team in dealing with this issue. I just had a couple of requests as you think about mid-year. I had my staff go through a number of the referrals and recommendations that were made either by myself or other colleagues in motions to be considered at mid-year. And while the staff may decide not to recommend an adjustment at mid-year or to respond to it, what I would like to make sure that we get is the anticipated cost and also the feedback from you on those items. You may decide that the staff doesn't want to recommend them for one reason or another, and I think that will help lay the groundwork for the budget and also help us understand your priorities as you think about the both mid-year and the June budget. Is that something that you all can do?
Sure, we'll do
Great.
that.
And then the second question I had, and I really appreciate Supervisor Ellenberg's point about just the whole budgeting process, and I think with the acquisition of the hospitals, which I'm confident is still going to happen. Look at James feeling all lucky there. I don't want to jinx us, but
Feeling all lucky.
but that we, as part of our budget process, I would just like to ask the chair if we could consider a deeper dive into both the budget, since we have a new member. I think that's just really a good opportunity to get a refresher for everybody, but also to better understand the anticipated strategies for the hospital as part of the budget process, just because I think it's going to be important that we do as much education, both of the board but of the public, as we can relative to, just the implications of such a large change in our organization.
I certainly think that's a great idea, and I'm happy to try and make sure we incorporate that in the mid-year budget conversation. And I'll ask Dr. Smith now and my staff to make sure that we put our heads together before that meeting to add in some time for that purpose rather than just sort of start on the run, if you will.
That would be great. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Williams.
There were no reportable actions taken at the closed session of January 14th, 2019. I'll add just a few comments regarding the hospital acquisition and the related kind of court proceedings. Bankruptcy court, shortly after Christmas, did approve the sale order, approving the sale to the county. And we were very pleased with that outcome. The Attorney General did file, as the County Executive mentioned, an appeal of that order and a request for a stay. The order remains in effect unless a stay is granted, and so the stay is really the most significant concern. A stay request has been made of the same bankruptcy court judge that granted the sale order. There's a hearing that's set for January 30th. We will be, of course, vigorously opposing the stay request, and we'll continue to be talking with the Attorney General's office about how to resolve their concerns, if we can, but how to resolve their concerns regarding the conditions that were imposed on Verity by the Attorney General's office in 2015. Those conditions were really designed for a for-profit entity, and we'd been in conversations and continue to be in conversations with the Attorney General's office. Those conversations began back in mid-October around how those conditions look in the context in a world where the county, which is the safety net service provider, governed by a whole different set of legal regulations, given that the county has obligations, for example, for care for the indigent in the community, it's a completely different context from having a hedge fund buy charitable assets, obviously with the intention of using them for profit. So as the County Executive mentioned, we do have a meeting today with the Attorney General's office, but in any event, I think it's important for folks to know the Bankruptcy Court did thoughtfully consider the issue, did issue the sale order to the county, did address the objections raised by the Attorney General, and will continue to pursue both tracks, which is absolutely continuing to engage in conversation with the Attorney General in the hope of developing a win-win, but also ensuring that the county's position is represented appropriately in court.
Mr. Williams, both you and Dr. Smith have been very expansive and tactful in describing the situation, but to cut to the chase, if there's a stay, we can't move forward with the acquisition.
That is correct. If there's a stay, the sale order won't be in effect. Without a sale order, we cannot close.
And if we can't close, what happens?
Yeah, I think the likely outcome, given that there were no other bidders at all that stepped forward for these hospitals, I think there's unfortunately a real prospect that the hospitals would ultimately close.
Just thought it was important to bottom line the conversation a little bit more. Thank you. Anything else on this item? We're on item number 12, colleagues, County Council's report. If not, we'll say thank you to you both. That takes us, or would take us, to item number 13 on our regular agenda. But as you will recall from our consent calendar discussion, this is another item which has been held to a subsequent date, in this case a date certain, which is January 29th. That then, being the case, means we go to item number 14, and I believe the Office of the County Executive will present on this item.
Yes.
Do you want to take a minute while staff finds their way to the chambers?
Yeah, maybe we can move on for
All right.
a second.
We do have one card that's been turned in. Want to let you know I've got that. We're going to just pass item 14 momentarily and go to item 15, which is to approve the surveillance technology use policies for existing surveillance technologies that have been reviewed and approved by County Council as to form and legality. Supervisor Chavez, you will recall that we also heard this item at FGOC, and these items 15A through I have been reviewed. We have one card on the subject, so why don't I ask Ms. Bassi if she'd like to come forward and speak to this item before we ask for a motion on item 15, which I will be prepared to make in a moment.
Joe, I'm glad you brought up the FGOC meeting because I actually watched that remotely. It was pointed out to me. And I particularly watched the part where Jeff Rosen sat here, and I have a lot of expertise in training, formal training and interviewing people. And Jeff Rosen looked incredibly shifty and dishonest when you discussed the cell phone surveillance and privacy issues. And let me paint the picture for anybody who missed that. Joe asked Jeff Rosen how this would work if they seized somebody's phone, and he said he would get a warrant, and they would look at the phone, and they would make sure what they were looking at was covered in the warrant. He's also said that related to stingrays and unidentifiable models and serial numbers that the two of you have had through all these meetings, he didn't want to give you any information. He didn't even present it in closed session with James Williams. Cindy, you keep saying you appreciate their work. You haven't audited their work. You don't know if they're doing the right thing. We now are facing the Attorney General. The county is also named in an antitrust. Noted on the State Bar website, antitrust determination number 2018-003, September 25, 2018. That was brought on behalf of a number of mothers and others from this area. And it's currently before the California Supreme Court. James Williams has not been audited. You don't know if he's doing his job. Jeff Rosen is out of control. And Joe, your instinct was right, but you backed down. When Jeff Rosen was sitting there telling you how he was going to use these surveillance policies, you backed down. You exposed the county to the most risk of invading privacy, of misusing technology, and on spying on our citizens. Susan Ellenberg, you have legal training. We expect you to use it. We expect you to use your intuition as a mother. We expect you to use your moral compass and your legal compass to navigate these very important issues. They are putting into place illegal practices.
Thank you for your comments. All right, let me just check with the clerk, see if we have any other comments on this item. And I think ordinarily we'd turn to Mr. Marquez to present on this, but Dr. Smith, any comments?
These are the same reports that were heard at FGOC, and there's been...
All right, thank you. If the clerk will display the voting panel on our screens. Colleagues, I am prepared to move approval of the recommended action as contained in our published agenda. I'll lean forward to do that. We have a second from Supervisor Chavez. We'll ask all 5 members to please vote on the screen. All 5 members having cast their votes, we will ask the clerk to please display the results overhead, and the motion carries 5-0. Thank you very much. We could go back to item 14 if we're ready. Good.
Right.
And I'll turn to the county executive once again, and board members, again, we are going back one step to item 14 on our agenda.
I will go ahead and make the presentation. This is a request related to a contract for the Minority Business Consortium to help us with notification and solicitation of minority businesses for construction projects in the county. We have had an outreach process involved in our procurement in the past. However, it's been pointed out that there has not been as broad an outreach as we would like to see. Minority Business Consortium has a history of working with VTA and with the city of Santa Clara related to the stadium construction, and has been able to, at that point, solicit and find many small and medium-sized minority-owned businesses in order to participate in the process. So we're asking to approve an agreement that is creates a pilot program in the county, and we will assess the outcome of that pilot program and come back to the board for further issues or further extensions as necessary. Part of what we need to do, and we're asking directions to do, is to work with the Minority Business Consortium and procurement in order to come up with a list of measurable outcomes, and when we come back to the board, we will have a report on those measurable outcomes. So we're asking you to receive the proposal and approve the delegation to the county executive to complete that, and approve an appropriation to pay for it.
Thank you. Comments from members of the board? Supervisor Ellenberg?
I think this is really an excellent goal, and I'm glad to hear that we are assertively and aggressively seeking to diversify the companies and vendors that we do business with. I just have, again, a process question. One of the things I consistently heard about county government was RFPs for everything and 3 bids and lowest bidder, and it looked to me as if that wasn't the process here. The agenda said that this was a self-solicited or unsolicited proposal. So I would just like information about how this was selected outside of a bid process, and how routine is that?
The county board has adopted basically 3 processes for approving contracts. One is the RFP process, which includes basically a formal request for bids related to specific needs. It also includes an informal competitive process, which can also be done where essentially we identify the bidders that are likely and we communicate with them about whether they're interested. The other 2 are single source contracts and sole source contracts. Sole source contracts are reserved for those entities where there's really only one potential bidder in the community that can bid, so we don't go through the RFP process or competitive process. Single source contracts are for those situations where there are other bidders who could, but for particular reasons, we think that this individual bidder is a better choice based on experience and expertise and proven results. So this particular contract arose generally out of a referral, and it is a single source contract related to the fact that this group has had considerably positive experience with VTA and also with, as I mentioned, the 49ers Stadium and a number of other construction procurement processes. So we didn't go through an RFP process.
So I'm glad to hear that. At the end of the pilot project, assuming its success, do you anticipate that we continue? And I'm looking forward to learning more about this organization too. I've also heard good things. Continuing with this group or doing an RFP at that point, or is this a situation where they really are the only ones providing this service?
We would anticipate coming back to you with our performance evaluation numbers, and at that point making a recommendation to the board whether or not to do an RFP, and then the board would decide whether we should proceed or not.
Thank you.
Thank you. And again, we do have one card that I'm going to call somebody, but if there are questions at this point, and I see no others, then what I'd like to do is ask Reginald Swilley to come on up. We do have your card. Thank you, Reverend. And that's the only card thus far. And then after we hear from the speaker or speakers, we will bring it back to the board and ask if there is a motion and take a conversation then. Welcome, sir.
Thank you. Congratulations on it. And that was a great question. Some of the other supervisors and the county executive have heard our spill. And one of our approach is different. And that's why we've been evangelizing this around the area for quite some time now. And we've moved over $100 million in Santa Clara County from the good old boys to spread this out so that other people can have access to this commerce. We are trying to bring other people into this circle of commerce. And I think that I'm encouraged that the county is saying we really need to do that. It is better for our economy. Our approach is different in that we don't do this bureaucratic outreach. The reason we moved over $100 million in the last few years is because we take a different approach to it. And there are agencies around the country that's been trying to do this. And there are companies and government agencies that have this built inside their system, that they are trying to do outreach. We just think that in 2019, as we stand, there should be a more robust women, minority, contracting relationship with government agencies and private agencies around the country. Around this county. And for it to be as anemic as it is, it speaks to there needs to be another approach. And that's what Minority Business Consortium has done. We work with all the chambers. We work with the Vietnamese Chamber, the Hispanic Chamber, Black Chamber. We are members of the Chamber of Commerce here in Silicon Valley and Palo Alto. And we think that what we are doing is infecting the area with the idea that there should be more people at the table. And there should be we have a better opportunity to bring more people at the table, and I think it will affect our economy in a broader sense. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your comments. Let me just confirm with the clerk, I believe that's the only card we have. It is. We'll bring the matter back to the board. We'll ask clerk to please display the voting panel on our screens so that if someone would like to make a motion, and we have a motion by Supervisor Cortese and a second by Supervisor Wasserman. We'll ask all five members to vote on the screen in a moment, but first just a quick question. Supervisor Cortese, do you want to speak to the item? All right. And the motion is for the recommended actions contained in our published agenda. Is that correct, sir?
Yes, a motion is a staff recommendation.
Thanks. And that includes the one-year pilot and the commitment from the executive that will have a performance-based contract with measurable outcomes. Do I get that?
Yes, I appreciated and would appreciate the county executive's overview, including his responses to Supervisor Ellenberg, and would incorporate all of that into the motion.
Great, thank you. Then we'll ask all 5 members, please vote on the screen. That having been done, we'll ask clerk to please display the results overhead, and we'll indicate that the motion carries 5-0. Thank you very much. Thank you for your presence today. All right. I believe that means we now go to item 16, and we have 1 card on this item. We have 2 cards on this item. And if the County Counsel's Office wants to come forward while we're doing this, why don't we let you present, and then we'll take the 2 cards we have. Mr. Williams, do I look to you or Mr. Coelho today? Mr. Coelho. And again, if folks would introduce themselves for members of the public, those who are watching, and most of the board members will know who you are, but particularly with a new board member, it'd be helpful to put names and faces together.
Good morning, Rob Coelho, Assistant County Counsel. The annual surveillance reports before you are required by the county's Surveillance Technology and Community Safety Ordinance. The ordinance requires that annually, following the board's approval of a surveillance use policy, the departments that have the use policy present to the board an annual report describing whether the technology at issue was used consistent with the policy, as well as covering 7 categories of information relating to any non-privilege audits that were done, any public records requests that were made, and other categories, so that the public will be aware and the board can certainly inquire as to whether or not the technology has been effective for its designated purpose, as well as if any issues have arisen in the last year that cause the board concern or require, from the board's perspective, additional information to be provided. In this instance, there are 5 annual reports that are presented to the board from various county departments, and I believe representatives of each department are present to the extent the board has any questions they'd like to ask.
Thank you. And you've been joined by? Please introduce yourselves for the board and the public.
Good morning. Is this on? All right.
It is now.
The light is on when the mic is off. Interesting. Okay. Good morning, board. This is Assistant Sheriff Ken Binder. I am with my colleagues, Captain Dalia Rodriguez, Captain Jim Jensen, Captain Jim Helms, and Deputy Jonathan Suela. Each person represents one of the annual reports that will be presented today, so they are here to answer questions if the board has them. And also wanted to say congratulations to Supervisor Ellenberg on the election.
Thank you very much. Thank you all for being here. I do have some questions today, and just a reminder that the recommended action involves receiving the report, receiving the annual surveillance reports, but then for board members, C involves a finding that the benefit to the county and the community of the technology outweigh the costs, and that reasonable safeguards exist to address reasonable concerns regarding privacy, civil liberties, and civil rights impacted by the deployment of the surveillance technology. So the questions I have are as follows. Let me first say I think the annual surveillance reports for the most part are very well done and cover the ground pretty nicely. I think that reflects 2 things in my judgment. One is that you all did a nice job on them, and the other is I think we were fairly clear in the ordinance that the board adopted about what the expectation was for each. Thank you, Mr. Coelho, as one of the folks involved in the drafting of that language. I think it highlights the fact that if you're clear about what you're asking for, people can more effectively communicate that. So all good there. Let me ask the following questions. There is reference to privileged internal audits as opposed to just internal audits. Can someone help me understand the distinction between the 2?
Supervisor, I can do it from a legal perspective. The surveillance ordinance requires in the annual report for each department to provide information about any unprivileged audits that were done of the surveillance technology or compliance with the use policy. A privileged audit, by way of example, would be something initiated by our office where we would have the work product privilege or attorney-client privilege. Oftentimes that will result because of a claim that's been made against the county and our efforts to investigate or defend the claim. An unprivileged audit would be one that is conducted presumably internally by the department. So its own investigation, for example, or its own audit to determine how the technology has been used or how a particular aspect of the use policy has been complied with.
Okay. So the unprivileged audit is essentially an audit that's being done to confirm that the use of the technology is consistent with the policy, yes?
Yes, from a legal perspective, yes.
Okay, thank you. Then looking first at, forgive me, lots of paper here today. Looking first at the annual use report for the county government center security cameras. My recollection is that, and there's reference to this in the document, that the camera system is administered both by the sheriff's department and by the district attorney's office, depending on which part of the building we're talking about. Is that a correct recollection? Yes? That's correct. And it indicates that during the period of this annual report, which I gather is actually for 8 months, just by virtue of the calendar, January 1st through August 31st, if I got that right? During the period of the 8 months, it indicates, and I'm looking at page 3 of 4, packet page 111, during the period covered by this annual report, the district attorney's office conducted 2 internal audits of the county government center security cameras, no policy violations to the system. There's no indication as to whether or not the sheriff's office did any internal audits to make sure that the use of the system was wholly for the purposes described and prescribed.
I can try to answer that a little more clearly.
Please.
So the sheriff's office, we don't have administrative access to the system. It's stored and housed in the DA's office here in this building. We have a single computer that is in the far side of our workstation, and our court technicians have the ability, if we're notified of an issue at 70 West Heading, to log in remotely and view the cameras live. We can't record, we can't do anything else but view them live.
Okay, so let me, without compromising security at all, and if I start to head down that path, I'm sure the county council will lean forward. But my recollection is that the, quote, administration of the system by the district attorney was focused on the west wing and some other portions of the building, but that the sheriff's department had the responsibility on the east wing and the 11 floors. Am I just remembering that incorrectly, which is entirely possible?
I believe it was divided like that. However, we only have remote access to the east wing and nothing else.
And that remote access is only live?
Correct.
So there's nothing in the way of access to monitor or to audit then, other than real-time video?
Correct.
Okay, thank you. That's a helpful understanding. Let me just ask the district attorney's office, is that square with your understanding of who's doing what? Anybody from the district attorney's office here? Mr. Coelho, could we get an off-agenda report? I guess I should ask Mr. Williams, confirming that understanding of who's in charge of what and who has access to what. And my concern, colleagues, and just for the record, I shared all these questions with the sheriff's office yesterday so that they could be prepared. My concern is that one of the purposes of the surveillance technology ordinance is to make sure that the limited uses of the technology are in fact the limited uses of the technology in fact, not just as a matter of policy. That requires some audit process, some ability to identify misuse or abuse of the system, which to their credit both the sheriff and the district attorney have done with various databases, for example, in the past when people have misused the databases for non-law enforcement purposes. So I'm just trying to ascertain that we are, in fact, looking over our own shoulder to make sure that we're doing all this in a way that's consistent with those privacy protections. Next question is for the body-worn camera system and the description of how the technology was used. And I should say here, I'm very pleased as someone who pushed this with the sheriff a couple of years back that we've been able to move as far and as fast as we have. But it says we are projected to complete training and issuance of body-worn cameras by November 2018 if new cameras are received as planned. My question is, did that happen since November of 2018 has now come and gone?
Yes,
and if you'd re-identify yourselves, that'll help us keep track. Thanks.
Captain James Jensen from the Sheriff's Office. And yes, sir, we're at 99% complete. We do have the 1%er of deputies that have been on long-term disability. Once they return to duty, we do get them trained and issued a body-worn camera.
Thank you. Good to hear. And then on page 2 of 3 for that same report, which is our packet page 114, it talks about effectiveness in achieving its identified purposes. And it indicates that the Sheriff's Internal Affairs Unit reported that there have been no complaints about deputies wearing or using body-worn cameras. And my question to you all is, so that tells me that there have been no complaints to the Sheriff's Internal Affairs Unit. What I want to know is, have there been any complaints to any other part of the Sheriff's Department about the body-worn cameras? And again, colleagues, one of the reasons for these annual reports is we think we have a good idea, and in this case it was an initiative that I pushed with the sheriff, so I clearly thought it was a good idea to go out and get the body-worn cameras, but we should be asking ourselves on an annual basis, and that's what these reports are for, did that give rise to any concerns that we might not have anticipated or may have anticipated but need to address more fully? So what I'm trying to get a sense for is, were there complaints that might have gone somewhere else other than just to the Sheriff's Internal Affairs Unit?
There are two different mechanisms for citizen complaints. One would be Internal Affairs. The other would be the body-worn camera unit itself. And neither of those different units got any complaints this year.
And I apologize for continuing to push, but my expectation would be that while there may be two different venues for complaints, as an official matter, my experience with people who complain is they just complain to whoever they want to complain to. So I'm trying to get a sense for whether or not anybody complained in any other venue. I'm just trying to get a sense for and if the answer is we truly did this for 8 months or a year and there really were no complaints, great. But if there were complaints that were misdirected but were nonetheless complaints, that's just what I'm trying to be absolutely positively sure about.
As reviewing this report, I did reach out to the different patrol divisions to seek if there were any complaints made to their divisions, and I was told there were no complaints. On a personal note, being out in public wearing the body-worn cameras, we get more citizens just curious about the system and what it is, so I've taken it off my uniform and handed it to the citizens so they can see what it feels like, and I explained the process of it.
Great.
So hopefully that answers the questions.
Thanks. One of the conversations we had, and I don't know if this goes to you or to you, Assistant Sheriff, one of the conversations we had when we approved the body-worn camera acquisitions was about what we hoped the benefits would be, which had been borne out at least in some other jurisdictions where they had some data. And the experience, the sort of double-edged benefit was that there were in fact fewer cases where there was a use of force, and there were also fewer complaints against officers because people didn't file bogus complaints when they knew that the camera was not going to back them up. Have we collected data on either of those things? Do we have the ability, let's just stay on the patrol side for a moment as distinguished from the very different environment at the corrections side. Do we have data that would tell us over the period of time, for example, compared or contrasted with a prior period in another year pre-body-worn camera, whether the use of force numbers are the same out in the community, and whether the number of complaints, not about the body-worn cameras, but about alleging use of inappropriate use of force are any different?
We do have numbers. Captain Jensen has numbers regarding the use of force.
Your mic's not on, sir. I'm sorry.
We do have numbers regarding the use of force complaints, and Captain Jensen can give you those for 2017 and 2018.
Regarding use of force complaints, we have noticed a downward trend. I have numbers from 2016 where there was 35 complaints, in 2017, and we started issuing body-worn cameras around July of 2017, there were 31 complaints. In 2018, there was only 20 complaints. So we haven't noticed a downward trend of complaints after issuance of body-worn cameras.
Good to hear. Not, can't say whether those are statistically significant, but it's certainly good to hear. And then, do we have any numbers comparable for, and I don't know how you all define use of force out in the community, but whether or not those numbers have gone down? I'm guessing they weren't all that high in the first place on the patrol side, but maybe they were noticeable changes.
I don't have numbers regarding use of force statistics. We do track use of force cases in our incident library. It can be difficult to interpret. We may have one use of force case where there was only one deputy involved, and another use of force case where there was 4 deputies involved. So we have definitely been, in the last several years, stressing and pushing our deputies to ensuring that all use of force complaints are reported. I'm sorry, not just complaints, but uses of force incidents are reported. But I don't have those statistics in front of me.
Let me ask this. Could we work with you, Assistant Sheriff Bender, to get those numbers over the last few years to the extent that they're available, and then share them with the full board in a off-agenda report? Is that something you'd be able to assist us with?
Absolutely, we can do that.
Thank you. Appreciate that. And again, this is sort of about holding ourselves accountable for the decisions we made earlier, and this one, since I was pushing for body warrants, I want to hold my own judgment accountable as well. Jumping ahead to the integrated helicopter mapping system, my question has to do with the equipment and whether or not it has actually been installed. And I guess I need to ask, is this for the helicopter we have or the helicopter we don't have, and does that affect the answer to the question? And who's going to help us there?
Good morning. Dalia Rodriguez, Captain with the Sheriff's Office. Happy New Year, by the way, and congratulations to Supervisor Ellenberg. Yes, so we do have the equipment. We were able to make that purchase. Unfortunately, and it is for our current helicopter. Unfortunately, due to our maintenance shop, which is an outside vendor, they were not able to book us in to get the equipment installed. Once they were able to book us in, they had to order additional parts to make sure that the software was compatible with the equipment. So now we do have the equipment installed. We're just waiting for the vendor of the actual equipment to come and calibrate the system so we can actually utilize it.
Yeah, part of the reason I'm at, how much was the equipment? How much does this thing cost?
I don't have that exact number in front of me.
Well, the reason I'm asking is because we got an annual surveillance report on this a year ago indicating that it hadn't been installed then. So if I remember correctly, and my notes are correct.
You are correct in that, and I believe at that time we actually had gone through the procurement process, but we did not actually have the equipment in hand.
Yeah, I don't think it's happy news that it takes a year to install a piece of equipment that's sitting on a shelf. I'll just let it go at that. And then where it indicates here that there have not been any non-privileged internal audits conducted, that would make sense if it hasn't been installed. So I understand that a little bit better. At least I think that's the issue there. Then going to the next report, the annual surveillance report on the main jail facility, Elmwood facility, for the facility security cameras. My question is again about these audits. And again, the audits are essential in my view to make sure that there isn't a misuse. Under non-privileged audits, policy violations, it says the Sheriff's Office plans to conduct an annual audit of the facility security camera system, but between January 1st and August 31st, 2018, the Sheriff's Office did not conduct any non-privileged audits. So does that mean we have no way of knowing whether folks are misusing or abusing the technology? And if it sounds like that's a pointed question, it's because it is.
Good morning, Deputy Jonathan Sawillo with the Sheriff's Office. The cameras were not fully installed until May of 2018. The Sheriff's Office completed a preliminary audit in October of 2018 before the security cameras were fully operational to ensure we would be able to extract the data and to conduct an audit before installation was complete. That preliminary audit found no policy violations, and then going forward, we will conduct ongoing annual audits to coincide with the annual surveillance reports, and that data and findings will be presented to the board.
Thank you. I just want to, I think I've done it twice now, but I'll make it a third time and let it go at that. I think these audits are important. I think, and I want to be clear about this, I know that 99+% of your personnel are doing it by the book, but you know from hard experience that there's always someone who didn't get the memo or didn't care, and who misuses or abuses the technology. And so what we're trying to do is both make sure we've got a handle on that if we're going to allocate county public funds for these purposes, but also to provide some incentive for people to avoid that kind of behavior, which can only be enhanced if they know that they have some risk of being caught. So I'm hoping that we're going to see a more robust program of audits in years ahead. Those were all my questions. Let me turn and see if any of my colleagues have questions. If not, we'll ask the clerk to please display the voting panel on the screen. We'll say thank you to all of you.
I actually just have a
forgive me. Thank you.
A quick comment.
Please.
Not a question, but I want to thank you, President Simidian, for championing these issues, and both you and Vice President Chavez for really working hard on these audits and understanding the importance and the detail of this kind of work. And particularly as I come in as the chair of the Public Safety and Justice Commission, I will look to both of you for leadership guidance in this work as well.
Consistent with the Brown Act, of course.
Consistent with the Brown Act.
Yes, there you go, just to get us all on the record. Ms. Bassi, you have a card in, and so does Mr. Largent. So before we put up the vote and ask everybody to vote, I want to hear from you.
So I'm going to go back to my favorite topic, and that's Jeff Rosen and the fact that you had questions today, and nobody from Jeff Rosen's office could be here to answer any of those questions. I'm also going to comment on the east-west security surveillance issue. Jeff Rosen has full control and ability over not only the district attorney's office, but victim services. Victims that come in have a right to privacy. That is the most vulnerable of all of our citizens. And for Jeff Rosen to have complete control over that is extremely toxic and dangerous. That end of the building also serves as the media center, which the county gets and collects $285 a month from each media agency that's in that area. Our sources come in there, we have meetings in there, and allowing Jeff Rosen to have complete access to monitor who's coming and going and speaking to the press is one of the most dangerous aspects in our democracy that I can imagine. Jeff Rosen has not been audited. Jeff Rosen is out of control, and his expenditures are not being prudent. Ms. Ellenberg, you have talked about looking at the budgets in this county. The largest expenditure we have are on our legal costs and costs incurred by Mr. Rosen's office. You're going to have to look at that. You're going to have to step up to the plate, and you're going to have to ask questions. Don't be ladylike, don't be polite, and don't be political. Ask the hard questions. That's what you were voted in to do. And I want to say that there are a lot of really good police officers that are struggling with this technology, how to use it. The good officers that I've talked to know that these surveillance videos are incredibly important. They're important in work relations disputes and other things. And they're especially important when it comes to domestic violence, as we just saw with the Reuben Foster video. So I'm telling you that you need to start looking at these policies and the people who are using them. And it isn't the danger of the individual police officer, it's the danger of the people who are not supervising him. And I look at you and I look at the district attorney for that responsibility.
And Mr. Largent.
Hi. Good afternoon, everyone. I was expecting to have, like Susan was talking about, I expected DA's office to be here. A lot of the different county meetings that I attend, Jeff Rosen shows up to fight for his 3% pay raise. He doesn't show to fight up for the DA's office or the community. He's an absolute no-show, so maybe we can put some pressure on him after this meeting. It was the same thing at all the different FGOC meetings, constant no-show. So you got Joe up there making those phone calls, trying to rally to get our DA over here. And it was always, let's just try to wheel Jeff Rosen in here, let's try to get in here. I don't think he really cares. We have items on here that are related to our sheriff's department, and as you can see, we have all the important players that are involved, and they're all here today. I'm impressed with that. Then we get to the DA items, no show, they're not here. And then I would also wonder, where is the representation from our public defender's office? Wouldn't they want to kind of keep those eyes in on our surveillance technology? There's nobody from the public defender's office out here. Anybody from the public defender's office? IDO maybe? No. And that's supposed to be our legal representation. That's supposed to get up to speed on what's going on in our community. No show. So I'm frustrated with that. And I think our DA's office right now, the only thing they're really working on over there is trying to take Susan Bassey down. They've put felony prosecutors on her case for filming police misconduct. They're going after a woman that has no criminal record and got destroyed in our courts and actually had the courage to expose this corruption. I mean, it's pretty neat, but she's probably going to end up getting convicted for all this stuff as everybody just sits back and watches her get slaughtered. This is just sad. But I do appreciate the Sheriff's Department stepping up to the plate and being here, so this is impressive today. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm confirmed that that is the last speaker we have. We'll ask all 5 members to please vote on the screen. And all 5 votes having been cast, we'll ask the clerk to please display the results overhead. And the motion carries 5-0. Thank you all very much, and we'll look for some follow-up on a couple of those issues, please. And Madam Clerk, I think that now takes us, or would have taken us, to items 17 and 18, but those were handled on consent. And that then takes us to, I believe, some items that arrived after the original agenda, which are items 70 and 71. Have I missed any?
36, I think you pulled off.
I pulled off item number 36, so let's do there's Ms. Wapensky anticipating. Thank you very much for the reminder. Would like to have the staff report on item 36, please.
We do 70 and 71 and then 36 because it was pulled from consent under so that it can go under 19.
Yes, that's fine.
Thank you.
Okay, so Ms. Wapensky, if you can hang loose, we'll do 70 and 71. Okay.
Should be relatively quick. No, they weren't pulled. Were they on consent?
No.
Oh, I have them on the regular agenda.
They're on the regular at 70 and 71. Let me just indicate my understanding and confirm with the clerk and the county executive. 70 and 71 were late arriving items.
Referrals
they were not on the original published agenda. They were subsequently placed on the original agenda as discussion items, and the custom and practice in the clerk's office is to simply put them at the end of the agenda when that happens, but their placement at the end, it does not mean that they are consent calendar items. It simply means that they are newly numbered items.
Right.
I said that with great authority. Let me just confirm now that it was actually correct. The clerk is nodding. Supervisor Chavez is nodding. All right. So Supervisor Chavez has asked if we would take those in order before we do item 36, which is also our custom and practice because we go through the items on our regular agenda and then go to items pulled from consent. So Supervisor, I think these are both your referrals.
Yes, they are. So so let me just start with the MLK Luncheon sponsorship. I'm bringing this item forward to ask $800 of county sponsorship for the MLK Luncheon on January 21st. This is a community event that started in 1980 and is a source of cultural and civic pride in our community. The event is being organized by the African American Community Services Agency, and all the proceeds are going toward youth leadership and empowerment programs. And so I'd like to ask for support on this. I also want to just add that through the FGOC process and, committee, Dr. Smith and Sylvia have been working on a new donor sponsorship policy program because I don't really, to your point, I don't like bringing these things one off. And FGOC has heard this several times, And it's supposed to be, in fact, I think the last time we heard it was in May of 17. And I'd like to just recommend that it come to the full board concurrent to the mid-year budget so that we can vote up or down on the policy as well. And that would be my motion.
I'll ask the clerk to please display the voting panel on the screen so that Supervisor Chavez can make the motion, which she's done. We'll get a second from Supervisor Ellenberg, and we'll then see if there's any conversation. And Supervisor, just to be clear, do I understand that the $800 is the table sponsor number? And are we going to do something with the 10 tickets, just out of curiosity?
I actually would leave that. Again, let me just say one thing about the sponsorship policy. It would have created an obvious avenue for that. What I would just suggest on this one is that we make a first offer to any members of the board or our staffs who would like to go and the county exec who would like to go.
Great. All right. Then we'll ask all 5 members, please vote on their screens. And they have done so, so we'll ask the clerk to please display the results. And motion carries 5-0. That takes us to item number 71. And Supervisor Chavez, I'm going to let you present.
Thank you.
And we do have one speaker who I will go to, and then we'll take comments and questions.
Excellent. Thank you. I'm also bringing this item forward. This is a $5,000 county sponsorship for the Women's March. The theme this year is very in line with our own county's work, which is celebrating and uplifting women leaders, advocating for gender equity, and fighting for the fair protection of all for human rights. And I would ask my colleagues to support this item, and I'm happy to talk more or respond more to if there are any questions.
Thank you. And we do have one speaker, and forgive me, I cannot read your handwriting on the first name. I apologize, but it's Ms. Sellers.
Good morning, Supervisors. Congratulations to Supervisor Elberg, who I happen to be in her district, so I'm thrilled you're here. My name is Ajay Sellers, and I am honored to be this year's co-lead for the San Jose Women's March. What makes it extraordinary for me to be up here talking is that I'm actually the only member of any leadership within the nation who represents the LGBT community. I actually represent the transgender community. And so the march is really important to me in a place that I can actually come and speak. This is much bigger than going to a Pride event or going to another event that's LGBT focused, because this gets me an opportunity to speak on things like women's rights and healthcare. Healthcare is very important to my community. It gives us a chance to talk about the environmental issues, which are important to all of us. This is a much larger platform than anything my community gets any other time. So the Women's March really gives all of us an opportunity to come forward and really express what our needs are from our whole community as a community. And it just gives us one big voice. So I hope that you'll support this. We look forward to we're expecting somewhere between 15 to 25,000 people this weekend. We're hoping it doesn't rain. So we look forward to all of your support and working with all of you in the future. Thank you.
Thank you. Comments or questions from members? Ms. Ellenberg.
Thank you. I want to share that I'm really proud of the hard work of the Women's March leaders and the fact that this major event is going to take place for the 3rd consecutive year in our county. And I'm also really personally grateful for the explicit manner in which our local leaders have disavowed the anti-Semitic words and actions of some of the founders of the national movement and have made it clear, to your point, that our march will be inclusive of all, respectful of all members of the community, and really taking a stand, among other things, against hate. I'm absolutely going to vote for this item today, but I want it, not but, period. I'm going to vote for this item today. I do want to suggest respectfully to my colleagues, in line with the other comments that I've made today, that in the future this type of funding maybe would be better perhaps coming from our individual office holder accounts or other sources, rather than, again, this contingency fund piece. And I would be really delighted to personally support it on behalf of my office.
Please, Supervisor.
I think that's such a good point, Susan, and part of the reason we developed this sponsorship policy is that there was some wrongdoing with the way people were using their office holder accounts to sponsor programs. So what we had tried to do, I think both Supervisor Simidian and I were really interested in the transparency of of having a policy that everybody could agree to, and really even setting aside a budget so we could prioritize what we wanted to invest in each year. So I do just want to reinforce the action we took in the previous action we took, really making sure that the policy comes back to the board before the mid-year budget.
I would certainly support not going backward, but again, then looking at the mid-year budget and having a place or a pot for this type of event.
Right, and a strategy. I totally agree. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. And I also will be an aye vote, but I think this is, I think there may have been, well, there may not have been, but there may be some confusion sometimes when people talk about office holder accounts as distinguished from their office budget, because the office holder account is voluntary contributions and the office budget, of course, is taxpayer funds. I think we're right up against the edge here on this one in terms of this being a political event, and the fact that the politics happen to be mine, notwithstanding, I think we have to be careful about making sure that we don't use public funds for capital P political events. My recollection, and I'm going to turn Supervisor Chavez to Mr. Williams, is we have some kind of a short form template that we use for inventory items that's a couple of pages that talks about non-discrimination policies. I don't know if it has any, prohibition on the use of public funds for, quote, political purposes, but I think we would be doing everybody a favor if we were explicit about that in the allocation of the funds. I know it's a 501c3, which I think...
That's right. I just want to, I actually, for the record, really want to reinforce that this is a 501c3, and again, I apologize, James, I'll let you jump in, but I do think that if we have the fuller discussion of the entire policy, it will allow us, if we think we need to put up additional parameters, to do so.
Mr. Williams?
We do have a couple-page sponsorship agreement. It does have provisions around compliance with all laws and non-discrimination. It doesn't have a specific provision around campaign activities, which are prohibited expenditure of public funds. This is a 501c3, but we could certainly use the sponsorship agreement and incorporate language to that effect in that agreement.
If it's agreeable to the maker of the motion, and we do need to let the screen pop up, forgive me for not noticing that, so that the maker can make her motion on the screen. I think it would be helpful to have explicit language prohibiting the use of funds for campaign or political purposes, just so we're not subject to criticism, and so the recipient has something in writing that clarifies that. Since they're a 501c3, the actual recipient, presumably they'll be mindful of that on the natural. But I think, there are a couple of challenges with this. One is the affiliation with the National March, which Supervisor Ellenberg mentioned. And, there's an affiliation there, and it's very clear that the National March is in support of the second-year anniversary of the resistance to the Trump presidency. That's a clearly political goal. That isn't what I see in the materials from the San Jose March. So it's a different march with a different message. But I think we need to, again, be careful about making sure taxpayer funds are not used inappropriately for political or campaign purposes. The other challenge is that, if there are 30 or 40,000 people in the march, which we hope there will be, weather notwithstanding, there are 30 or 40,000 different notions about what the march is about, because everybody will bring their own set of passions, as the speaker indicated. It's a bundle of concerns that bring people out to participate in this way. So I do think if we can be explicit, and if that's acceptable to the maker of the motion, that'd be helpful. And I think Supervisor Ellenberg's point going forward is, I'd rather we found ways to have individual supervisors, and, I'm guessing, Supervisor Chavez, that you've already contributed in some way to this effort, knowing you as I do. And I'm happy to do so as well. And so I think trying to do that in the future, She's literally writing that commitment down as we speak. Trying to go that route in the future would probably be my preference. So, Supervisor Cortese, I see your light is on, and then we'll ask all 5 members to please vote on the screen.
No, I'm okay with the language suggested. Of course, prohibiting campaign activities is a no-brainer, and I believe this group understands that, and I believe most 501c3s that I've dealt with understand that, just in terms of self-protection. For future references, we're going to be discussing policy. It's going to be messy, but I want to dive into the distinction that I believe exists between campaign activity and political activity because, for example, in your comments just now, President Smitty, and I don't want to debate the issue right now, we'll do it later, but you said prohibit campaign and political activity. I have no interest in prohibiting political activity by virtue of funding and resources that the County of Santa Clara has available. I do, of course, support prohibition of campaign activity. I've never known this group to campaign for any particular candidate one way or the other, pro or con. But like us, I've known them to take positions sometimes I would agree with, and sometimes I wouldn't, sometimes right, sometimes wrong. But I think it's in our interest to encourage folks in the public forum to continue trying to convert their values to political positions and make sure that they assert them, in the public square. So that's my point of view. It sounds like it might not be everybody's, but I just want to make sure for council's purposes as well, not to, go away thinking that the whole board wants to somehow, preclude any resources at all for any kind of political activity, over and above campaign activity.
And Supervisor, I do want to just clarify, lest it be misunderstood. I'm not talking about limiting anybody's political speech or political rights. I'm talking about the appropriate use of taxpayer funds. And I understand that you're going a step farther and saying you might be comfortable with the use of taxpayer funds for political efforts, but I'm trying to be a little more cautious. Fair enough.
I understand. I just think there's a long, long history, almost right up to the minute of this board doing it, whether it's, funding sponsorship or resources for the NAACP or any number of other 501c3 organizations. It's been going on for years. I'm pretty sure the Martin Luther King lunch is going to involve a whole bunch of political statements by a whole bunch of people, including some of us, when we step up to the microphone. So, again, when we come back and discuss this policy, I'm going to be trying to stand in the way of excluding those, excluding any prohibitions of how we use our funds, however we approve those, for organizations that are continuing the dialogue out there that I think is so important to our community.
So I just wanted, so first of all, I want to thank all of my colleagues for your really thoughtful comments. This is a little bit different than what we normally do, so I think that's right. And I particularly, just Susan, I think your point about the way the local community is responding to the anti-Semitic, comments and really unfortunate behavior of leaders nationally. I really appreciate you drawing that distinction because that was something they certainly discussed with me prior to me bringing this forward. So thank you for that. And I do just want to add one point just about the march itself and the message. We at the county, as my colleagues will know, and Ms. Ellenberg, you may not know this, we have done a series of hearings relative to the impact of a change in leadership at a national level to women and people of color and folks who are undocumented and people who are documented and fearful at a national level. And so in some ways, the distinction between the discussion about the importance of political speech is actually very important. And even as we're looking at the Women's Leadership 2020 work that we're doing, there are a lot of strong feelings about what kinds of policies we ought to live under in our country, and some of that could be considered political speech. So it's really worth us diving into this when we have a conversation about sponsorship, because we're going to we're going to be reaching out to the public to ask them to help us with some of the work that we're doing with the women's, the Leadership 2020. So I have a feeling this discussion will come back sooner rather than later.
Yeah.
So thank you.
All right, we're going to ask all 5 members, please vote on the screen. And all 5 votes have been cast, and we'll ask the clerk to please display the results, and the motion carries 5-0. Thank you very much, and thank you again, Supervisor Chavez, for your willingness to incorporate the language requested. Now I believe that takes us to item number 36, yes?
I think you wanted an explanation.
Yeah, I wanted a staff presentation to understand what's happening here and why.
I think I'll start, and then you can ask questions of Martha if you have more.
Thanks. And if folks would introduce themselves once the county executive is done with his remarks, that would be helpful. Thank you.
This is really just a transfer of resources that were previously committed to the Sheriff's Office in order to provide the winter escort service. As you know, when it gets darker, a number of our employees feel less than safe as they leave work and go to their cars. So we were told by the Sheriff's Office that they're unable to do this. So we're proceeding with developing a contract with outside vendor to provide this service. So these are resources that need to be utilized for that vendor. That's basically it.
Thank you. Ms. Wapinski, did you have anything you wanted to add?
No, nothing to add. Martha Wapinski, Deputy County Executive.
Doug Feliciano, Director of Facility Security.
Let me ask a question. So we used to count on the Sheriff's Office to provide these services, yes?
That's correct.
And the Sheriff's Office has decided in consultation with you all not to provide the services going forward. Is that where we are?
Correct.
Was there a reason for that?
The reason the Sheriff's Office gave was they indicated they were monitoring their overtime expenditures very closely, and they did not have the ability to provide the service this year.
Uncharacteristically, I'm going to bite my tongue, and so we're gonna simply reduce by 40,000, take the 40,000, and reallocate it. Yes.
Correct. This is money that was already allocated for winter parking patrol that's moving from one budget unit to another. It's a technical budget adjustment.
And the budget unit from which it is being taken is what again?
Budget Unit 230, the Sheriff's Office.
Okay. And doesn't that sort of leave the Sheriff's Office right back where they started to the extent that they had a concern they were articulating in the first place? No? Supervisor Chavez, if you've got thoughts on this, I'd be happy
Well,
to hear them.
I think there are, I haven't had a conversation with the sheriff about this. And Martha, by the way, I'm sorry. I thought that was going to be really quick, so I didn't mean to hold you up. But but I think one of the challenges is, and again, this is really a worthy mid-year budget discussion, is that we've had an issue, and we've raised an issue, and you have, about the amount of overtime that they have. And I guess if you're using a different service, you're not going to have overtime, but we're still going to pay for the service. And so I think one of the questions we need to better dive into, and I know we've been doing that under FGOC, and I'm hopeful that the Public Safety and Justice Committee will take a look at, is really how do we get the appropriate level of staffing so that we're either not dipping it or using overtime, or we are purposefully using overtime with an idea that we know it will exceed for some number of years until we're fully staffed. That's just sort of my perspective on it, my understanding when I read this.
Supervisor Cortese? Well, Dr. Smith, you got anything else on this? Now I really can't bite my tongue. I mean, we've got people who work here after hours we need to keep safe. The board has a conversation. I raise questions about tens of millions of dollars in overtime, and the response is to say we can't provide public safety services for a public building and for the men and women, particularly the women who work in the building and who are out in the parking lot after hours. My understanding of state law is that the sheriff's department is responsible for keeping people safe in the public buildings, the county buildings. Dr. Smith?
I'm not sure I can add much more to this discussion except to say that we certainly need the service, and the money was allocated for that purpose, and so now it's going to be done in different methodology, and so we're asking the board to reallocate it.
Well,
I don't think it has much likelihood to have much effect on overtime. We're talking about millions of dollars of overtime utilized, so 40,000 should be insignificant.
Well, let me ask either you or the county council, does the sheriff have an obligation to provide public safety services for county buildings? Because this is not a situation that's going to be unique to this building and to this particular set of employees.
Yes, county facilities are within the general jurisdiction of the sheriff.
Enough said. Supervisor?
Just let me add one thing. At Valley Medical Center, we use some hired staff. At the downtown clinic, we use some hired staff. I do think, I think it would be worth us having a longer discussion about their staffing strategies and patterns. We've done a little bit of that at FGOC. I'm sure you'll do that. But, you know, we have a mix. Now, I also have some thoughts as we get through the staffing study for the jails that I'm really interested in, because I'm wondering if it's possible for us to use correctional officers outside of that, of the corrections facility to play a similar role at county buildings, just to get them out of the jail, because I think that might actually be healthy. So I'm hoping that we have some flexibility in terms of how we provide security services so that we can create career ladders. It's just as a side note for my colleagues. Thank you.
All right, we're going to ask we're going to say thank you to the staff for being with us here at the end of the meeting. We're going to ask the clerk to please display the voting panel on the screen, and we're going to see if there's a motion to approve the recommended action. And all have voted except for myself, and here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to abstain. I don't want to vote no, because that would mean I didn't want to provide the $40,000 for the protection, which I think is needed for staff who are here after hours. I don't want to vote yes, because I'm not happy that this item is here. I think this is the responsibility of the sheriff, and I'm disappointed in that outcome. So for me, the solution is to cast an abstention and ask the clerk to make sure that the minutes reflect the reason for the abstention so that it's not misunderstood. Thank you very much. All 5 members have now voted. We'll ask the clerk to please display the results overhead, and the motion carries 4-0 with 1 abstention. For the record, the abstention is Supervisor Simidian. That would be me. I believe that is our final item. And before we adjourn, and I doubt there'd be any objection to adjourning before noon for once, do I understand, Dr. Smith, you're headed to Sacramento?
Yes, we're going to Sacramento probably as soon as we get out of here.
Great. And do I understand that Mr. Williams, you and Ms. Hanson are also headed to Sacramento? Well, then we wish you Godspeed and good results. All right. With that being said, we are adjourned. Thank you all very much.
This is the ordinance list report for the Board of Supervisors meeting of Tuesday, January 15, 2019. Item number 18, introduction and preliminary adoption of salary ordinance number NS-5.19.68, amending Santa Clara County salary ordinance number NS-5.19, relating to compensation of employees, adding one unclassified management analyst or associate management analyst position in Department of Parks and Recreation. Position shall expire at 11:59 p.m. on August 9, 2020. Item number 26, introduction and preliminary adoption of salary ordinance number NS-5.19.67, amending Santa Clara County salary ordinance number NS-5.19, relating to compensation of employees, deleting one health education specialist position and adding one health planning specialist 3 or health planning specialist 2 position in the public health department. Item number 27, introduction and preliminary adoption of salary ordinance number NS-5.191.65, amending Santa Clara County salary ordinance number NS-5.19, relating to compensation of employees, increasing the salary of the radiation therapist classification by 20%. Item number 29, introduction and preliminary adoption of salary ordinance number NS-5.19.66, amending Santa Clara County salary ordinance number NS-5.19, relating to compensation of employees, adding one e-discovery manager position in the office of the county council, and amending the salary ordinance to salary schedule to add the classification of e-discovery manager. Item number 30, introduction and preliminary adoption of executive leadership salary ordinance number NS-20.18.06, amending Santa Clara County executive leadership salary ordinance number NS-20.18, relating to compensation of employees, increasing the salary range of the clerk of the Board of Supervisors classification by 2%, increasing the salary range of the county executive classification by 2%, increasing the salary range of the county council classification by 5%, increasing the salary range of the public defender classification by 3%, and amending Section 8 vehicles to restore the flat rate vehicle allowance to $600 per month. Item number 52, introduction and preliminary adoption of salary ordinance number NS-5.19.69, amending Santa Clara County salary ordinance number NS-5.19, relating to compensation of employees, adding one attorney 4, district attorney or attorney 3, district attorney or attorney 2, district attorney or attorney 1, district attorney position, and one unclassified criminal investigator 2 or criminal investigator 1 position in the office of the district attorney. Unclassified position shall expire at 11:59 p.m. on August 9, 2020. This concludes the ordinance record list report for the Board of Supervisors meeting of Tuesday, January 15, 2019.